Welcome to the 20th episode. I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody who has listened to any episode, shared an episode, or recommended the podcast. I appreciate you more than I can say. Thank you. So, to celebrate this milestone episode, I'm bringing back a dear friend of mine, Katherine Tsagaris. Dive deep with us on this topic that I feel is currently circulating. It is all about boundaries, the antidote to the people pleaser. How to create boundaries, what boundaries look like, and its importance. Kat is a highly respected and decorated educator. Katherine has taught in London, Finland, the US, Melbourne, and as well as Byron Bay and the Gold Coast. She has explored all facets of education. Today, she delivers one-on-one teacher coaching and support, provides consulting for schools, delivers speaking at events, supports homeschooling for families leaving the education system, and both supports and facilitates workshop spaces at retreats that focus on personal growth, rites of passage for teens, as well as a monumentally important relationship between the mother and their daughters. Well, that's enough from me, guys. Let's jump straight in. Welcome to the Honesty Policy Hour. I'm your host, Stephanie Marie, and it's time to put everything on the table on this beautiful journey of healing all areas of our lives, one deep conversation at a time.
Hello.
Welcome. You're my first repeated offender on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
How
OG in
exciting.
the house.
I know. With the new addition, I can't believe how pregnant I look right here. Jesus.
I am loving it. She's blooming. Oh
How
my
funny.
gosh, look at that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me again. I'm so excited.
Me too.
Cool.
And I say that, and it's joining again, but obviously we talk every day. So we have our little mini podcasts, and then we have these formal ones.
We do. These are our formal chats. I just like we said previously, like we just compile our voice notes and here's the podcast.
It's a book. It's a conversational book, exactly, or a TED Talk.
We are a TED Talk. I love it. Well, the main reason I invited you on again, not because we have amazing conversations, but also because there's a topic that is floating around at the moment that I feel requires or deserves some more attention. And what better person to ask than you, because I feel that you practice this so well. You talk about it so well. You've given me such amazing feedback on this, not only socially, but professionally as well. I think you do this very, very well. And enough with the suspense. The actual subject is...
and there's just so many things. Like take your pick. Who knows what it's going to be.
Wow, the main one that we're talking about is good old boundaries. But no, I think it's very...
love the boundaries.
Yes, it's such an interesting... I think it's just the flavor of everyone's lips at the moment. It's so common. People are talking about it so much because I feel that it is almost being required more so in people's lives because, I think the pendulum can swing each way really, really quickly. I think sometimes it can go where there's none, where people are just like, yes, yes, be the good girl, be the good boy, just say yes, 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 people pleaser. But then there's the other side of the pendulum swinging where it's walls up, all the boundaries in the world that do not let anybody in as a coping or protective mechanism. So it's very interesting and sort of finding your happy medium and what suits with you depending on the person or, more person, I guess. It's a very interesting topic, and I feel that, I just wanted to dive deep and what better person to bring you on?
And it's one that we could speak about for hours. And I have found boundaries to be the saving grace because it's helped return me back to my the truth of who I am and actually living from a place of truth rather than living out the projections of other people, the expectations of other people, and then having this really uncomfortable, gross kind of outfit like kind of squished over me. That's sort of what it felt like before. And when you spoke earlier and you said, you know, what's the difference, the nuance, I guess, between boundaries, healthy boundaries and walls. The way I see boundaries is a way that you love yourself while loving other people. Walls are blocking the love of other people out.
Definitely.
So what's a way that you can not lose yourself, which is almost like not trusting yourself to hold who you are in the energy of another person, in the space of another person, and working out what those actually are. And they are so different for different people, you know?
Of course. Well, like you think about the original word of it, and it usually goes with like property, like from one line to another when we talk about boundaries. And I feel that, you know, it all starts with how well you look after your own property, how well you actually protect your own boundary. And when you understand your property and what you wanting to do it, and you take full radical responsibility for your own property, that's when you kind of have a bit more of an understanding. That's how I have taken it out of it from recent years. Anyways, it's just a very, I think it's just reflecting upon you first and then going and just watching the way that you, I guess, correspond with other people.
Yeah, and it's a lot more work than it seems, especially because if you really are a people pleaser starting off, you actually don't even know what you like, what you want. You're so like the habitual pattern of going with the flow, of not rocking the boat, means that you've ignored so many nudges, so many desires, so many wants, so many intuitive hits for the benefit of a dynamic and a connection. And obviously that's not authentic. So the connection itself is already got a thread of inauthenticity, which means it's not actually real, it's conditional. And you don't even know what it is that you want. So the exploration of boundaries requires someone to almost like block out all of the things, all of the noise that tells that person how to be, how to show up, and turn inwards and start to like learn what it is that they actually like. And what's really normal is like a numbness and an I don't know, and a real confusion, I guess, over, well, where do I even start? I don't even know what my favorite color is. I don't even know what I like, what makes me feel happy. And that journey is actually a really beautiful one. It's a really soft one. And it does require a bit of courage, especially because if you're used to being the people pleaser and the easygoing person, like I said, you haven't really followed your own nudges. You might be the person that's breaking out of your friendship circle and trying something really different, and it might be considered really weird, or, you know, you may feel the judgment of that. And I think judgment's almost like the kryptonite to the people pleaser, isn't it? It's like the whole reason they don't want to be the standalone person. It almost feels like the glare of the sun is upon them and they're just like standing on a podium with millions of people pointing at them like, freak, you know, but
it's that confrontation that people are so afraid of. It's that confrontation of, I don't want to affect, like you said, I don't want to rock the boat of our relationship. I don't want to say, hey, I don't like how you said this, or hey, maybe don't do that next time, or let's work at a better way to do or communicate, or whatever it is. That takes a lot of courage. As you said before, it's a lot of courage. And it's just such a common thing where people say, yeah, I'm not going to tell you that you pissed me off or what you did piss me off. However, I'm going to tell all of our friends and, you know, Gabby and Joe and whoever, and I'm just going to, you know, just dish it all out to them, and that's the way I'm going to release my frustration rather than coming straight to you and talking about you. And I feel that that is such a common story. I've grown up with that. I've seen that with my family. I've seen that with my friends, friendship groups. It's so common. And then it ends up breaking the friendship because you found out that I told Gabby last week and didn't tell you. So it's just this toxic relationship that becomes full just because I didn't have the courage to say, hey, Kat, I didn't appreciate this.
Yeah, I feel like discovering what you actually value and what you actually want is the first step. And
Mm,
then identifying the standards that you have is the next. And the third is what you've just said, communicating that to other people. And that is so, so difficult in some ways. But I promise the first step is the hardest. The
yeah,
first conversation is the hardest. And if this is helpful for anybody, my recommendation would be that you start and you practice with someone that you already know is going to be a safe place and receptive to you
that's
expressing that boundary. And you could even say, like, this is
great.
actually really hard for me, but I know you're a safe person and I want to practice expressing a boundary. So can we discuss something that didn't feel okay for me?
Mhm.
And I
Yep.
still love you and I want to be able to express this for us to have a really good friendship.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's such a beautiful place to see. And, you said with someone that
Mm,
you have an easy friendship with, or someone that you find practices boundaries really well, or somebody that you actually, yeah, that is really open to having really beautiful open conversations, and someone that won't cut you out and judge you, someone that you're 100% sure. And that's, yeah, you said it perfectly. And I find that, I do
this
that
is, yeah.
well with the people that practice themselves. Like if I said something to you, you would be like, oh, all good, all
I'd clap it
good.
in. I'd be like, yes, I'm such a stand for my boundaries and everybody else's. I just feel like it's such self care. It's knowing yourself enough to be healthy. And I want you to be healthy in our friendship. And I want to be healthy in our friendship.
Mhm. It's so applauded. It's such an applaud. What's the word I'm looking for? Plausible? No, is that right? Plausible?
Applaudable?
Laudable. Oh my god, it's past 7 o'clock over here. I'm just yeah, using all my
Yeah.
final pieces. But yeah, it is. It's such a beautiful trait when you see someone do that because it becomes so you're like,
Mm.
oh, okay, all right, I know now. I'm not going to cross that line. I do appreciate you telling me, and that's all good.
Well,
But
the
yeah,
thing is, it's not personal.
no,
It
you don't
is
know that you
not
pissed me
personal.
off.
If you tell me, Kat, I actually don't like 20-minute voice notes, I'm not going to go, and look, this is maybe develop, depending on where somebody's at. I appreciate feedback and I appreciate honesty. And I'm not going to go into a shame spiral that Steph doesn't want to hear what I have to say because I know that's not true, or that I hog up space and I don't know when to shut up because I also know that that's not true. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to hear what you say and go, yeah, cool, thanks for letting me know. If I don't know, how is this going to get any better? For the
100%.
next the next thing you know, I'm going to get 30-minute voice notes. Like, I need to know where that healthy fence is. And
Yeah.
I actually feel like rather than the fence analogy, boundaries are almost like, it's a bit of a weird one, but I feel like they're like fly screens. You're still letting the air through. There's still a connection, but there's stuff there to prevent the bugs from coming in, to prevent the like stuff you don't want, but it allows
Yeah.
the stuff you do.
Yeah.
And again, that's the difference between that and like brick walls of like,
Mm,
you did this to me,
mm,
therefore you can never speak to me like that again. And I
mm,
also think you need like humanity. Like, you can't, I personally believe you can't have unrealistic boundaries of like, you're never allowed to speak rudely to me. Like, being rude is subjective. You might think being rude is swearing. Personally, I don't find swearing rude, but calling names I do find rude. And do you
mm,
know what I mean? Like, and in the context of an argument, especially between a couple, for example, it depends on the couple and it depends on what they've considered to be normal and acceptable for them. But like, yeah, it's got to be realistic. It can't be like, you're never going to do, I never. you know, within reason. I do think that there are hard no's that you need to be really clear on with people. Like a hard no
Mm.
for me, for example, in a relationship, there's several, but one of them would be being hit. Like any physical violence, it's an immediate hard no,
Mhm.
never speaking again,
Mhm.
cut all contact.
Mhm.
Um, a standard would be for like a person that I'm in partnership with would be like for them to be physically healthy and mentally healthy and emotionally healthy. And I am that standard and I want that standard in the other person. And
Mhm.
I'm using standard and boundaries as like interjectively as words, interchangeably. So yeah, I feel like there's a difference between like things that keep the relationship healthy and the friendship healthy and the familial relationship healthy, and then like the absolute like it's a one-way street out and no
Mm.
coming back, you know. And for some
Yeah.
people it's cheating, and for other people it's having an addiction, and for other people it's they're not the same religion as me, you know. But it takes an awareness of who you are as a person to know, and sometimes that we discover these things because someone has crossed a boundary. That's where we
Yeah.
work out, okay, that's where it is, because that
Mm.
really hurt.
Yeah. It's an interesting, like the that sting that we feel when someone does the something to us, recognizing like where it actually comes from. I feel that like has been like not reacting, I think, is a really big one for me personally. I feel that when someone's done something in the past, when I was a little bit more hectic in my hectic days,
Pre-evolved Steph.
pre-evolved Steph, 100%, when I was a little bit more like, yeah, just if anyone said anything to me, I was just a ticking time bomb. And that comes from unprocessed emotions and just a whole bag of things.
Have we met? Hits me high. I'm probably I hear you,
I
mate. I was
love
the same.
it.
Sensitive and defensive, worst
Mate.
combination. So
Oh,
difficult for everybody else.
mate. I was just like, oh, geez. I think about it now and I'm just like almost embarrassed. It's like, shit, it's
Yeah,
full on.
we've all got our evolution.
But it was very much just just the 2 seconds of just losing it, where now it, it it takes me a couple of days to process things. And you know, as I've said this to you previously, I get quite angry. I can get like, if I get angry, I'm very easily to defend myself. But if I get hurt, it takes me days to kind of be like, I turn into this wounded puppy where it takes me ages to understand what's happening. Or I just go into my shell and it takes me a few days to just to unravel, just to find out where it's come from, what it is, all the things. And acknowledging the two of the way I behave with the two, and then seeing with the where the boundary kind of fits in that, I've noticed that not swallowing my pride, but just taking a second, taking a beat to just sit with it and be like, treating it the same way I would with sadness or offensiveness. And I do like the way that that works because it gives you that time to really understand exactly where it comes from, the evolution of it, and why that person did that to you. Is it because it was her or him, or was it because of something else that was there? And, or is it just a hard no for you? And this is just something that you just do not want in your life. And I really, it's just a really beautiful tool that I've used because it allows me not to be angry. It allows me to understand where it comes from. So I'm able to tell that person, this is where it comes from and this is why I didn't appreciate it. However, I want to move forward from it, because some people don't know how to come from that without, because when you're angry, no one's going to listen to you being angry. You're just going to have this tit for tat, and then a friendship can be dissolved, or whatever the relationship is, and it can end quite quickly. Where understanding it and talking from a place of understanding is so crucial, and this is where I feel a lot of relationships lack. It's the controlled conversation of the calmness and sitting at baseline and being able to speak, so you can hear what you need to hear in return, and why that person said that, so you can get a bit of peace as well. I feel that was a big one for me personally.
I think that's really beautiful. And like when you're hurt, I sort of think of like 8-year-old cat. Like when I'm hurt, I think of the little girl in my heart that's like, "Oh," and she's crying. And, if you think about yourself in that way, in that state, like, how would you treat a little girl who's crying or a little boy who's crying? You're going to be gentle with them and be like, "Are you okay? What happened? Do you want a hug?" Like, okay, we could just sit here for a little bit. And they lean to be like, they pushed me over and they hurt my feelings. And like, we all have that in us, And I think it's so important to be able to give yourself that spaciousness, because then you can work out what it was that hurt and then be able to communicate that, and often be able to communicate that with so much honesty and truth and authenticity, and
Yeah.
also in a way that it's going to be received.
Yeah.
Sure, the anger, like, I think anger is so important and so healthy, and so it's part of the human experience. If there's two people going at it, then I'm not sure how much of it's going to be heard. It's just going to help shift the energy,
Mm.
for sure. And you don't always have to process that with the person right then and there. Like, you can go into the car and go scream it out and like punch some pillows and
Yeah.
come back and be like, you know what? Actually, something's really bothered me. And underneath my initial anger, this is what it is. I feel, and it requires vulnerability. I feel really insecure about
Hmm.
blah, 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 whatever it is, my weight, my appearance, the I don't know, the bloody neighbor. I don't know. But yeah, it's such a nuanced thing, and it touches on and it has so many threads with other things. Like, I just see boundaries as related to vulnerability and self-awareness and truth speaking and
Mm.
authenticity and courage. Like, coming back to the communicating part, it's being able to lean in to awkward, humbling, vulnerable, embarrassing conversations, difficult conversations. And there are
Mm.
many times when I have wanted to be anywhere but where I am in being about to have a conversation, that I'm like, oh, here we go. Like,
Mm.
it gets easier through practice, but it
Mm.
doesn't mean, you relish it and you're like, delicious. No, it's
No, you never
Brussels
love
sprouts every time.
stories. It's just super uncomfortable. But on the other
Yeah.
side of that conversation is the beauty, is the power, is the medicine. It's all of that. And it's just so liberating, especially when you come to a place of agreement, like understanding each other and agreeing on it. It's so powerful because as well, you get a clear understanding of that person and the way they communicate with you, especially if you've expressed that boundary for the first time, or any boundary for the first time with that particular person. It's really interesting to see what you receive as a response, because it's a really good indication of where that relationship is coming from, especially if you've come from a place of pure vulnerability and honesty. And
Mm.
no one can come at you with aggression, and if it is a full reflection of that person, 100%.
Which is why I'm coming back to, like, when you are if you find yourself someone who doesn't do this, wants to start to do it, it's resonating. It's so important to be gentle when you're with yourself when you're learning something new.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to the friend that maybe it could be something really little, like they're constantly late whenever you meet up with them. Do you know what I mean? It could be something really little,
Yeah.
and but it's to someone who isn't going to bite your head off, who,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it might be it's an uncomfortable experience for them, and you can't expect perfection from them either, but picking someone who is going to be receptive and isn't going to bite your head off is a really good learning ground for you as a person to then express that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally feel, especially as a teacher, it's so clear as a teacher, so it's such an easier example to kind of reference, but it's actually negligent not to have boundaries. And anyone who has kids knows that. Anyone who teaches kids knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has plants, like a tomato plant, is going to grow all over the ground unless you have that stake there and tie it there, and it's going to thrive. Like,
Sure will.
everything in nature has boundaries in a way. Like the ocean, it has boundaries. It's got the cliffs around it and it's got the sand and it's contained and held. And sometimes there's a push against that too, but they exist. They're there.
Oh,
Um,
perfect way of putting it. That tomato plant. What a beautiful analogy.
for all
Because
the
I
ethnics
know
out there.
I've
Shout out to the Greeks and Italians.
Hey, attention all wogs. Get it. I love it. But it's so true because my tomato. Had in my previous property, we had a lot of tomato plants, and mate, I had to be on them like a friggin'
Yeah,
rat. And it's
absolutely.
such an interesting way when you start to see it because it's a beautiful analogy for life and relationships. I even see it with my son. He's obviously starting to talk and becoming in those toddler days now, and it's very testing. And I have caught myself in those moments where no, no, he wants this, he wants that. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I'll do what you want. I'm like, hang on a second, I'm the freaking mother here. I had to like remind myself that no, like I'm teaching you how to be a good human being or to the best of my abilities. And this is what you require. You require boundaries and you're going to hear no a lot in your life. And, this is where it starts. And no, you can't watch TV before breakfast. And no, you can't do this or whatever it was. But it was funny because I was like, oh, yes, yes. Because I'm going through that crossroads at the moment where he was a baby and I had to respond to every cue he had. He cried, I picked him up. He cried, I fed him. I rocked him. I gave him love. And now he's getting to an age where he's starting to respond. And I'm sort of treating him like the baby, but remembering, no, 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 he's at that toddler phase now where he needs and requires boundaries. And it's a really interesting place to be in because it's that transition now. And I have to catch myself and be that responsible parent and understand that this is
Oh,
where it
it would
begins.
be. It would be because a baby and a mother, there are no boundaries.
No,
Nothing.
no.
You don't have access to your body in the way that you
Mm-mm.
want. You've got to be responsive. That's the survival. That's what that baby needs.
Mm,
And I love that distinction that you've made in what's appropriate for different ages because he is at a different developmental age now.
mhm,
And I think there's so much humanity that's required in the way we express our boundaries. Like he needs a lot of humanity and I like it's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel angry. You can cry. You can be mad. Like and holding that boundary in a really kind way rather than like you know, there's this, I think, kind of misconception that boundaries need to be expressed harshly and abruptly and um, really rigidly. You can be firm without needing to be rigid.
yeah,
You
there's
can be
kindness.
firm and kind without needing to be rigid and lacking compassion and dismissive, you know?
Of course. And like you said, it's exactly that. It's okay to be upset. Like you're experiencing frustration for the first few times, and it's a shit emotion to feel. Frustration is a shit. It's not fun at all. So imagine feeling that for the first time. You're like, what the fuck is
And you've
this?
got no emotional regulation. So you're like, what
Zero.
the fuck? It's flooding his whole body. It's actually affecting his entire experience of the world. And he's having his response of, like, I want this to end as quickly as possible. I'm going to try everything in my arsenal. Kids know they are vulnerable, they are small, they are
Mhm,
weak. They
mhm,
are, and I say this in the most loving way possible, they are exceptionally manipulative and they should be. They
mhm,
have to be like that. Their survival is there, and they're the purest of heart. You know, don't get me wrong. Kids are innocent and pure in the most like incredible way, and they are teachers for us all. I
mhm,
personally think, and it's why I love being a teacher. And I still marvel at the like cheeky little, I can see the cogs turning for kids at school when, you know, there's a firm boundary and they're just looking for the loopholes, any way to get around it and still get what they want. And frankly, I'm like, good. That's going to be a critical thinker later in life. It's going to be someone who's resilient and not going to take no for an answer in ways that are healthy. And yeah, so go for it. And the capacity is in the mother and the father and the
mhm.
grandparents and the aunties, uncles, and the adults around to, you know, hold that boundary to be able to withstand that, the different tactics. And our friends will do it too, our partners will do it too.
Of
And I
course,
think it's to be expected. We'll do it too
big time.
until we catch ourselves.
Well, exactly. That's where the beauty is, catching yourself actually doing it. Because if you don't realize you're doing it, how will you ever know to change it until somebody
Yeah.
catches you out, or you're like, oh my God, I've been doing this for the rest of my life. Where I've heard people say that, like, this is an interesting thing, but I'm starting to realize this now in my 30s or whatever it is.
Mm.
It's very interesting once you start really analyzing the way you live, or especially when you meet new people, because you get to see yourself interact on a different level. When you're stuck in the same circle of the same people over and over again, you kind of forget and you kind of get stuck in your old ways, and people just accept you for who you are because we've been friends for 20 whatever years. But when you meet new people and you start to see your qualities that are not ideal, or for some people anyway, and you start to see other people react towards them in a negative way, and you're like, all right, let's start. All right, this is interesting. So new relationships can really trigger that as well. I've found personally too.
Do you know what? I really love that. And I'm going to put a question to you.
Go for it.
Because we're fairly new friends in like the last few years. Have
Mhm.
you found that in our experience where there's been something uncomfortable that you're like, oh, I've seen something in myself that I don't like there
Um,
in how you're showing up? Because I really get what you're saying. I I really resonate with like old friendships and family for sure
mhm.
have really well worn grooves of neural pathways.
Yes.
And fuck me, mate, it's been so hard. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
I
go for it.
don't. It has
Sorry for the kids.
been the
There's kids in
growth
the
of a
car.
lifetime to like, as a 39-year-old woman through the different stages of life with my mum and dad, for example, to not slip into that child's dynamic with them, that I am an adult woman, that they are an adult and an elder in a different way, and we're both adults now, and not discounting their experience and them not
Mhm.
discounting that I'm not a child, that I have lived and experienced the world. And yeah, so that is difficult. And personally, I have found that things that I'm a standard for and feel inherently in myself, not historically, come out really easily with new friendships because we've kind of already sniffed out that we've got that in common. We've got those standards in common. Like,
Mhm.
I have personally found a lot of honesty and truth to be the easiest thing with you. It's just how we've started. We haven't had to start with like, um, I love Steph. I've known her for years, but she does this thing, and I've just learnt through diplomacy that I really love the longevity of our friendship, and so I've learnt to live with that. Do you know, we haven't had that
No.
um, coloring the dynamic, but I'm curious. Like, sorry, I feel like that's a really long-winded
No,
question, but
no, no,
have
no,
you
no.
had that in, either
I,
with me or other new friendships? I don't know. I'd love to hear it.
I have definitely, but I can't describe the specifics if that makes sense. Because when you ask me that question, the emotions of that awkwardness of, oh my God, I did that, or that ego coming and go, oh my God, I did that, crept in instantly. However, I don't know what it is. Does that make sense at all? It's
Yeah,
really
I do
weird.
get it.
Yeah. So I'm going to
That
have to
is
come.
that feeling.
It is. It's that, oh my God, I stuffed up. She's going to hate me forever. I feel like an 8-year-old girl. And and that is literally what it is. It's like, yeah, I don't want to be alone. And that's our primitive feeling of just being ostracized as a society. It's dangerous to be alone. And this is where it comes from, where we want to be accepted. And this is where the people pleasing hat comes on. We push forward our boundaries so we can, or push away our boundaries so as long as we're accepted, that's all that matters. And
Mm.
it's this juggle. And but to answer your question, I have felt it in our relationship, but I can't tell you exactly what it is. I'm gonna have to come back to you on that one.
I am all ears.
Yeah,
I'm so
I
available
will.
for it.
What about you?
Um, can you? I'm just trying to think because I worded that and
Hmm.
I was listening. Can you ask me the question and then
Yeah.
I'll kind of hear it properly?
Yeah, have you done anything in our relationship that you've felt that I've had a negative reaction to, that you've done something that potentially pushed my boundary?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
There you go.
And the thing is, and I say that really solidly because I trust me and I trust you. And because I know that you have expressed, and you're really real and raw. And this is why I love that this is called the Honesty Policy Podcast, because it's such a standard for the way you are. And yeah, how you be in the world, that I trust that whenever that comes up, if that comes up, then it's something that we discuss. But
amazing.
No.
Good. I'm glad. But it is because I find that with new relationships, when I say new, I probably mean the last 3 years, maybe. That's kind of newish still. You're still kind of learning each other after a few years. It's what I've found with people when they've crossed your boundary, it's immediate cutoff. It's the cutting off, less the communication, because we haven't been friends for too long. Therefore, let's just end this here because I didn't like what you did. Therefore, that's a reflection on your personality. Let's just stop that there.
Which is the ego's avoidance of actually just having a difficult conversation and being vulnerable. The ego is like, no, not going to be fucking vulnerable, mate. I'm not going to show my belly and say, stab me right here, thanks.
No.
I'd rather be safe and reinforce this idea that they've hurt me and I'm the victim, and the world's fucked and people should just read my mind and know that that was not okay.
That, what you said right there. People think that everybody can read their mind. That one, you should have known that you'd pissed me off. You should have known. You know how many times I've heard that before in my lifetime? How would I have possibly known? And I think also I've done that as well, but subconsciously, not consciously at all, specifically in my relationship with my husband. Hey, Mark, so I'm just going our relationship. Not to a bad point, but it's to a point where I've spent days, and I've actually noticed this recently on my behalf. It's been days and days where I'm like, he hasn't said this or he hasn't done that. But I'm like, how does he know this when I haven't actually expressed that to him? And then I tell him, but the fear I experience when I'm about to tell him is insane. It's like that yucky feeling in my throat where I'm about to open up. But honestly, when I say it, it's not that bad, and he didn't receive it in a negative way. So I'm like, why does that happen? What's going on
Bless
there?
the men in our lives, honestly, because we can sell them so short by not bringing it forward. And to be honest with you, I know so many good men, and I have very good men in my life. And whenever I have brought something forward, they are like, really? Thanks so much for telling me. The rereaction is so stunning that I'm like,
I'm going to do this more often.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad.
Exactly like with kids. It's negligent not to communicate it. It's on you. It's about being a fucking adult and feeling the discomfort. And I'm saying this, I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to me as well, and to everyone, that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. If something is a standard or a boundary, the other part of boundaries, the first element is the third element, because the first is working out what they are. The second is communicating them. The third is upholding them. And upholding them means having the conversation when a boundary is crossed.
Because
that I actually feel is the hardest part, because you feel like the first two are like, I've done my bit, I've said what my thing is, and now we're good.
No.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. People are busy. People forget. People can test boundaries to see, do you actually mean it or are you just talking shit? And yeah, they should in some ways, depending on what it is. And it is up to you to do the work and to say, actually, it's a no. And sometimes it means, we're actually teaching other people how to be with us and what kind of curated experience we want to have in that relationship and in life.
What our terms and conditions are. I think understanding them, mate, that's just, you have to know what pushes your buttons and
it's the manual to your soul half the time. Like, you need to know all these things about yourself. But just going back to what I was saying with like my own experience with my husband, like I even said, like the repercussion of me not expressing how I'm feeling or him, whatever it was, is me like being pissed off with him for something he didn't even know, and then he does something
Mm.
else to piss me off that is minute, that wouldn't have pissed me off if that other issue wasn't there, and then it just explodes, and I'm like, what? Why do I do that? And it's just this toxic trait that I've picked up on myself, and I this is childhood wounds, as they always are, and it's really interesting just recognizing that in myself, and I'm like, wow, I am so sorry, but I was a bitch. I'm a bitch. And I'm just like trying to work that out. But it's just, I don't know if it's just a woman, the way the woman's brain works, but it's just this constant thing of just like, you should know. How do you not know? You should know me. We've been together 10 years. Why wouldn't you know that I don't like this? Why would you know that you need to do this to me or for me? It's, it's this weird dialogue that we have happening sometimes, and it can be really toxic.
And I think it's just the feral little girl inside, and we all have them. Feral little girl, feral
That
little
little
boy.
bit.
Because when you think about it, like Mark has been, and I know this because you've told me, in your life for 10 years. So you know him, and he has shown for 10 years that he is there for you, that his love is solid, and all of the things. And still, the feral little girl will be like, maybe today's the day that he's going to be a fucking dick, and he's, you know what I mean? Like, he's going to leave me over this fucking thing, and it's probably like, who did the laundry last, or I don't know, like,
Yeah.
and I feel for the men sometimes, and this isn't a gendered thing, but I feel for the people on the receiving end that are like, look at the scoreboard, man. Like, haven't I earned some trust here? Tell me the things. I want to know. It kinks your hose, like exactly what you said. You're sitting there cooking quietly, and the guy's just like, oh, what a quiet, lovely, peaceful day. I appreciate the silence. How good's this? And meanwhile, you're just simmering in the background. He's like, hey, mate, how you going? You fucking asshole.
I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous how we can behave sometimes. And there's, funny, I'm just gonna flip the switch a little bit, but there was this video going around on, was it radio? It was like mainstream radio, something I don't really listen to, but it was a clip on Instagram that was floating around, and it was talking about the women's brain, the way it works, and it was like, this is why men fall asleep in 2 seconds when they hit the pillow, and why women sit there for freaking. Have you seen it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't, but I can imagine. I've seen them, yeah.
And why women.
And we're just like,
but the way she worded
furiously going.
The way she worded it, it made me laugh and cry at the same time. Like, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but she's like, so what does she say? She's like, yeah, we go to bed like 45 minutes after you go to sleep, because we're like, the lunches, this, school, this, kids drop off. Oh, I've got to cook dinner. I've got to make him lunches. I've got to do this. And then I go back to what I did at my 21st birthday to embarrass myself. And then I go back to the kid's birthday. And then I go back to what and I pissed myself at that stage because it's so true. And I'm like, how did I go there from the kids to my 21st 15 years ago? Like, what the hell?
Woman's brain. What a gift.
Woman's brain. And it's exhausting. It is so exhausting sometimes. And you just got to put it just like, just a rock in the cog, and just like stopping it from moving so much, because it's just, even just taking a breath and just slowing down and appreciating and just saying your mind, giving yourself a day after you get pissed off so you don't bite their head off, and just being like, hey, I've had time to talk about it, or even like venting to people that are like-minded, people that understand the way you're thinking. That is safe. And just getting some, look, I find that there's a big difference between gossiping and
processing.
100%. And sometimes you need that other person in your life where you're like, hey, just after some feedback or just some understanding, can you tell, like, what would you do in this situation?
What am I not seeing here?
What am I not seeing? Exactly. And just giving me something. And I think that's really beautiful too, because sometimes you can get lost in the haze of your emotions and your triggers and your childhood shit and all this stuff, and it can be really hard to kind of find, how to set this boundary and how to express why it's a boundary in the first place. So I think, yeah.
I really loved two things that you said there. And the first one was like building slowness in, because when we're hurt, things can, people have different ways of being hurt. But it's easy to jump to conclusions and make assumptions and draw threads that aren't quite there.
Yeah.
Of equal, thing or hurt me equals they don't give a fuck about me, they don't love me, I'm unlovable. Like, these things are so automatic and subconscious, and building space in where you can. I know people are busy, but like, even if it is going for a walk is such a slow pace. Like, even a bike ride is good, but it's still going at a quicker pace, and you're already kind of like, a mind is already kind of doing that. Something that forces slowness is so healthy, because it allows you to see things and catch things and not feel them so immediately, I guess. Even if it's something like, I personally find cleaning to be quite therapeutic in that space, like rhythmic, slow things. If I'm going to sew, if I'm going to paint, if I'm going to vacuum or wash dishes, like, it does really help me because it's rhythmic and it's slow.
Yeah.
So I really loved that, and it helps the person, identify the things and get to the crux of stuff. And then, oh God, what was the second thing you were mentioning? No, I forgot what it was. What was it?
Oh God, don't even ask me. I've already forgotten. And ask my mum brain.
Oh God, I'll have to come back to it if it's meant to be said. I think it was around processing, because I think, there is such a massive distinction. Like, gossip is, is just sharing information in a way that's got some ill intent sometimes. And other times it's harmless, but it's, just fueling your interest.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, processing can be really raw, and, and I think that's so important. That's what I was going to say. Like, the person receiving your boundaries doesn't need to receive your processing. The rawness, they don't need to receive that. It can happen, obviously. We're human beings, and especially in partnership. But, like, speaking to a friend, like, voice noting girlfriends is one of my favorite ways of processing.
Yeah.
And journaling, physically actually moving my body. Like, I can sometimes have a desire to run away. That can be one of my fight or flight responses, like flight. And I've noticed that running actually helps me, like the physical hitting of my feet on the ground and just smashing myself on the treadmill with running tires me out, and that's me processing. Other times it really is, like, honestly screaming like a fucking banshee in the car and, like, hitting the passenger seat and letting it out and being careful that I don't break a wrist, but, like that initial, like, edge comes off, and it means that, it's irresponsible for me to unleash that on somebody else.
No, you need to get the RAR out. Get the RAR out.
Absolutely. And then the other difficult thing I was going to say, which it's so humbling, is we've got to be receptive to people's no's as well.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to get to know yourself, work out your boundaries, communicate them, uphold them. It's another to be told no and hear that.
Because where do you go from there? If you've set a boundary and they've said no, is that the end of the relationship? Like, where would you go from there?
Okay. So I was thinking, if they have boundaries and they communicate them to us, we've got to be receptive to that.
Yes.
But that's a really great question as well. And I think that's a really good one to ponder. Like, I think part of upholding the boundaries is being able to, like, upholding them means, like, repeating them again and having a second and third conversation if that's what's needed. and walking away if that's what's needed too.
Yeah.
So if I was, it's such an easy boundary to use as an example, but if I said, I don't want the man I'm seeing to hit me, and violence is a hard no, if he was going to hit me, without question, that very moment, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done in all levels and I'm out. And I know that that's not available necessarily for all people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know things are complicated with kids and all the other things, but I'm saying my boundaries for me, I walk away.
Mm-hmm.
As painful as it may be, as damaging as it may be. Same with cheating. Like for me, cheating, I've expressed this before, we could have 16 kids and an empire built together with our lives and businesses intertwined. The day that happens, it's such a hard no for me, I'm out.
Mm.
As difficult and messy as it is, I'm out. And yeah, there's a lot of courage and a lot of hurt that comes with that. But if you know your standards and you know your boundaries, you got to uphold them. That is the work.
Well, exactly.
Otherwise, you're living a lesser life.
Of course, even the closest people to us, I think that's even the most important boundaries, because I feel that it's what happens. As we said before, you were talking about the tread rubbing from the family as an analogy, and that's just we accept them for who they are, and we can push aside our boundaries for them because we understand who they are and why they're this certain way. But I think that's where your boundaries need to be upheld the most sometimes, because it's still a relationship. It's still it's exactly the same. It just the years of knowing each other are just a little bit longer. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think, this is not to discount diplomacy. I think diplomacy is such a beautiful skill. I've got a friend, shout out to Ritza, her number one standout stellar quality is the diplomacy that she has. A lot of Leos actually have this too. Like there's this real ability to be able to like just enjoy the relationship and go into places where everybody shines and everybody feels really safe and comfortable, and not hit on the areas that are super sensitive or sore or wounds or whatever. So there's that too. And still I think like families and stuff, we need boundaries. Like I'm just thinking, and this is quite a personal example, but I have a beautiful, stunning relationship with my dad now. I did not always. And the journey of us developing a better relationship was me bringing in tight boundaries. There was a few years that he did not know where I lived. He knew the street and we would meet up for coffees and stuff like that, but my dad did not know boundaries. And I knew if he knows which house I live in, he's going to turn up all the time. And I had housemates and I'm like, I don't want them exposed to my dad just rocking up whenever. He's such a fucking wog. He'll probably arrive with his hairy back and chest with his shirt off. And like, they don't need that and I don't need that. He gets to learn like boundaries. And if this is what I need to do in order for us to have a healthy relationship, then that's what I need to do. And I know that hurt him for a little while, but it did really help us. And he's so much more considerate now with, like overstepping, being maybe too much. So like we have a gorgeous relationship and it's only because we have had those boundaries, and they're nowhere near as intense. Like now my dad knows where I live, we have open calls, texts, whatever. But repairing the relationship from what it was when I was an angry teen and he was a frustrated, overworked, angry dad to where we are now, like we needed some of those along the way to make it safer and to adjust the relationship to the woman that I am now and the older man that he is now,
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. What came up for me when you were describing your relationship with your father was I feel that the issue where the communicating comes in for the boundary to be set is you don't want to set it because if someone is being too much, as you said before, you understand why they're being too much because then they're more needier. Their needs are higher than yours. So therefore you don't want to push back and bruise their ego because you know that they require more than what you can actually give right now. But that is a really hard thing to express, to set a boundary to someone who is so sensitive. And I feel that that's another one where people can really struggle to set that boundary because it's not coming from any place of anger. It's just coming from a place of being sensitive to their needs as well. But again, the boundary will enhance the relationship in so many ways, but it's just a touchy subject. You know, they have so much going on and they require more. I'm just repeating myself. You know what I mean?
I do. And you know what? It's funny because this is another death of the people pleaser because it's not our responsibility to uphold or maintain or take responsibility for somebody else's emotions and their emotional reaction. We can make and package our boundary in a way that is soft yet firm, loving yet firm. It needs to be clear, but it doesn't mean if they had a bad reaction that we need to take responsibility for that, that we need to prevent that. Like, they're going to have their reaction regardless, and we need to trust in their capacity for that.
Yeah.
Even if there's someone who's like, you know, it's so hard to keep, you know, to talk in hypotheticals, but like I'm trying to think of an example where someone would be really, really sensitive and defensive. Yeah, I guess you could say things like, I notice that whenever I share something like this, there seems like some defenses that comes up. And like just leaving that there, that's quite neutral language, and just seeing what happens. And if someone's like, what are you talking about? No, there isn't. You're like, I can see that. I can see how there's no defenses there whatsoever. And there's that, like, yeah, whether they're willing to admit it or not, there is that element of like,
exactly. Yeah.
Fuck.
That the ego, the dance of the ego and the boundary, it's such a just a it's there, isn't it? It's just always there.
Yeah. And I get it. Like, I kind of look at the ego as like an overprotective ethnic mother. Like, it's someone who wants to keep you safe no matter what. And I know, for example, like back when I was 23 or 24, and I had one friend that had moved to London, but everybody else, my family, my community, everybody was in Melbourne. I know if I had asked my ego, my ethnic mother, alter ego, should I move to London? The response would have, the ego who wants to keep me safe would be like, are you fucking stupid? Like, what are you going to do to your career? It's a dangerous place. You don't even know anybody. Where are you going to live? What are you going to do? How are you going to meet anyone? If you meet anyone over there, how's that going to work with back home? This is all fucked. And I would have had to stay at home in my parents' house in Doncaster, safe and absolutely rotting in unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a difference between knowing the ego, which has a place. Like, I'm not discounting the ego. The ego wants to keep us safe, but using discernment to listen to the ego and work out, is this just fear speaking, or is my soul nudging me to something greater? And the truth of my soul being, in that instance for me, like, I'm going to take the leap of faith, no risk, no reward. And everything that flowed from that choice, and I know we spoke about it in another episode, but was such a universal sign to me. There were so many things that came from that, so many beautiful things that will like keep following that thread. And, you know, for years I was living with my ego. My ego was in the driver's seat and I had no idea. I'd react to things really raw, lead to people. You know, I'd make choices from the way I wanted to be perceived, from status, from how am I coming off, how do I look? Like, that's ego. That's not truth. You know, that's
Egos.
I feel like it's the gift of the 30s, the separation from the ego and the realization of when it's in the driver's seat and like going, cool, I hear you, but actually you're not the CEO. You can go and work in the mailroom. You are still required. You are still important, but you don't get to make the decisions here.
No. Oh, that's wow, so well put. The gift of the 30s. It really truly is. It's just things that you just don't see in your 20s. You have no idea. It is like you can maybe even in your late 30s during the transition.
And there would be some people who can, but I personally couldn't.
Neither. I'm still learning. It's
absolutely.
It's just that I think, the 30s life is quieter. Life is slower. Life isn't as social. Life is more, if there's kids involved, if there's work, there's more discipline. There's responsibilities. So yeah, there's more time for, I think you're interacting with so many different people as well with different levels. Like I said, when you start creating new relationships, you start to see these old traits poke out like an ugly wound, and you're like, I don't like the way I do that, or I do like the way I do that. So it's just, there's just a myriad of things that are the reason for that. But it's so true. It really is. And I'm very appreciative for all the things that I've learned in my 30s, because I'm a different person than what I was when I was in my 20s, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. God, can you imagine the gifts of our 40s and 50s and all the others?
Talking about this the other day,
I'm scared. Experience.
40.
We're blessed.
I know 40 scares me, but I'm like, I won't know what yet. We don't know what it
I'm knocking on the door, mate. I'm knocking on the door, and they're gonna let me in, and I'm gonna be like, what the fuck is this?
You're gonna rock it.
No, I'm actually excited. It'll be good.
Yeah. No, it just sounds like a big jump to me. Like I just feel like it. Do you know what I mean? It just sounds like, 40, it's interesting.
Yep,
right.
Totally.
We'll own it, whatever it looks like. It's just unavoidable, and I'd rather be 40 than not on this planet. So let's do it.
Yep. And how can it be the best way I'm going to do 40s and the best way I'm going to do 50s and 60s and all the rest? Like, I don't want to prescribe to anyone else's idea of how that's going to look. It's so funny. This is completely separate, but I've always had this view of like, I'm going to have a really hot body until I'm 69, and then overnight at 70, I'm going to become a fat grandma, and I fully want that to happen. I want to be a fat, cuddly grandma, and then my grandkids can just sit on my lap and find comfort in my arms. But until then, I want to be healthy and ripped and like a stand for the health and all of the things. So, that's my intention, mate.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, you're amazing. Well, thank you so much for this beautiful, raw and honest and vulnerable chat, as per usual. It was gorgeous. And I definitely took a lot of things out of that. So thank you.
So did I. And I just love us. I love that you invited me on again. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and everything that you bring and the beautiful sunshine that you bring too. I know it's cold in Melbourne, but
I'm wearing a turtleneck.
I look at you and I'm like, she's just that radiant Leo. That's just what happens.
With my mane. But I know.
Absolutely. It's there.
But no, it's beautiful. Like you said, as usual, I just love our chats, and what you get, guys, now is just how we are on a normal basis. It's just, this is it.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. And
thank you. And just as a last minute little plug, like if there are any teachers out there that are wanting any coaching on how to work with children and work with kids that have behavioural issues, ways of upholding boundaries in the classroom, I'm available, so you can email me at katherine.tsagaris@gmail.com, and beautiful. I'm more than happy to help.
Beautiful. I will chuck everything in the show notes as well, so people can access them nice and quickly. But again, thank you so much, my darling. I love you lots. It was a pleasure as per usual.
I know, honey. Thank you so much. I love you too.
No worries. Mwah. Thank you, everyone, for listening, wherever you're listening from. Have a beautiful day. Mwah. Peace.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you received a few good takeaways from the episode. If anyone came to mind while listening, please share it across. Your support will certainly help promote the podcast. To follow everything that I'm doing at the moment, head to my Instagram page, Holistic Healing with Steph Marie. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you on the next episode for more conversations that are raw, honest, and vulnerable.